Imagine a misty dawn on July 3, 1863, at Gettysburg. The air hangs heavy with the acrid scent of gunpowder from 2 days of brutal fighting. Confederate General George Pickett stands before his division, 15,000 men, mostly Virginians, North Carolinians, and Tennesseans. They're about to charge across nearly a mile of open field, straight into the muzzles of Union cannons and rifles perched on Cemetery Ridge. The order comes: advance at a steady pace, shoulder to shoulder, in neat lines. No running, no scattering, just a deliberate walk into hell. Why? Why would these soldiers, farmers, clerks, and laborers turned warriors, march willingly into a storm of lead and iron that could shred them in seconds? This is the enigma of the American Civil War, a conflict that claimed over 600,000 lives, where outdated tactics met modern weaponry, and men walked into enemy fire not out of blind obedience, but for reasons rooted in strategy, psychology, and the harsh realities of 19th century warfare. In this documentary, we'll unravel the threads of history to understand why Civil War soldiers embraced formations that seem suicidal to our modern eyes. Before we dive in, hit that like button and subscribe to join our growing community. To grasp this, we must rewind to the roots of linear tactics. Picture the battlefields of the 18th century, dominated by smoothbore muskets like the British Brown Bess or the French Charleville. These weapons were notoriously inaccurate, beyond 50 yards, more like shotguns than precision rifles. A soldier firing alone might as well throw rocks. But mass them together in dense lines, 3 ranks deep, and you create a wall of fire, volleys that could pour hundreds of balls into the enemy at once. This linear warfare was perfected by figures like Frederick the Great of Prussia and adopted across Europe and America. Discipline was key. Armies drilled endlessly to maintain formation under fire. Breaking ranks invited chaos. Cavalry charges could sweep through gaps like wolves among sheep. Officers needed to see and command their men, shouting orders over the din of battle, running scattered troops, making control impossible. As one Napoleonic-era manual put it, the soldier must fear his officers more than the enemy. This mindset carried into the 1860s, even as technology evolved. Enter the American Civil War, erupting in 1861 over slavery, states' rights, and Union. Both Union and Confederate armies inherited these tactics from the Mexican-American War and European models. Winfield Scott's Infantry Tactics Manual, based on French doctrines, was the Bible for both sides. It prescribed advancing in lines, halting to fire by rank, then pressing on. But here's the twist. By 1861, the smoothbore was obsolete. The Springfield Model 1855 and Enfield rifled muskets with their Minié balls extended accurate range to 300 to 400 yards. A single shot could drop a man at distances where smoothbores barely grazed. So why stick with walking into fire? First, consider the illusion of safety in numbers. In a line, soldiers felt protected by comrades, psychologically if not physically. Desertion was harder, peer pressure and the threat of execution for cowardice kept men moving forward. Union soldier Elisha Hunt Rhodes wrote in his diary after Antietam, "We advanced in line of battle, the men keeping up a brisk fire. It seemed a pity to kill such brave men, but we had to do it." The formation fostered a grim camaraderie, turning fear into fatalistic resolve. Second, command and control demanded it. Generals like Robert E. Lee or Ulysses S. Grant commanded armies of 50,000 to 100,000 men across miles of terrain. Without radios or even reliable couriers, visibility was everything. A compact line allowed officers on horseback to spot weaknesses, rally troops, and coordinate attacks. Scattering into skirmish lines, loose formations for harassment worked for small units, but for decisive assaults, mass was essential. running exhausted soldiers, especially in wool uniforms under a southern sun, leading to disorganized arrivals at the enemy line where bayonets decided the day. Bayonets? Yes, despite rifles, close combat remained the goal. Firearms took 20 to 30 seconds to reload, ramrod down the barrel, powder, ball, cap. In that window, an advancing line could close the gap. Statistics bear this out. Only about 1% of wounds were from bayonets, but the threat forced enemies to stand and fight or flee. Walking preserved energy and order for that final charge. As Confederate officer Moxley Sorrell recalled at Gettysburg, the line moved forward at common time, no double quick, saving their strength for the supreme moment. But the cost was horrific. Take Fredericksburg, December 1862. Union General Ambrose Burnside hurled wave after wave against Marye's Heights, where Confederates sheltered behind a stone wall. Irish brigade soldiers marched uphill into canister shot, cannons firing grape shot like giant shotguns. One survivor, William McCarter, described, "The air seemed filled with lead. Men fell like leaves in autumn." Over 12,000 Union casualties in hours, many from walking into concentrated fire. Why not adapt? Adaptation did happen, slowly. Early in the war, enthusiasm for linear tactics waned as casualties mounted. By 1864, entrenchments became standard. Think Petersburg siege lines, precursors to World War I trenches. Skirmishers screened advances using cover like trees or fences, but wholesale change was resisted. Training millions of volunteers from scratch was impossible. Most had mere weeks of drill. Generals clung to what they knew, Napoleonic victories like Austerlitz, where massed columns triumphed. Moreover, terrain played a role. Civil War battlefields were often wooded or rolling, limiting long-range fire. At Shiloh in 1862, dense forests broke lines into chaos anyway. And cavalry, though diminished by rifles, still threatened flanks. Open-order tactics invited encirclement. As historian Patty Griffith argues in Battle Tactics of the Civil War, the war wasn't as revolutionary as claimed. Effective fire rates remained low due to smoke, stress, and poor marksmanship. Soldiers often fired high or not at all in panic. Yet personal stories humanize the horror. Consider Private Sam Watkins of the Confederate Army of Tennessee. In his memoir, Company H, he vividly recounts Chickamauga. "We marched forward. The balls began to whistle around our ears. Men were being shot by the hundreds." Watkins survived multiple charges, attributing it to luck and the hypnotic pull of the line. You feel like you are part of something bigger, and to stop is to betray it all. On the Union side, Oliver Wendell Holmes, Jr., wounded 3 times, later a Supreme Court justice, reflected, "In our youths, our hearts were touched with fire. That fire was the crucible of marching into the abyss, forging bonds, and breaking bodies." Women, too, felt the ripple. Nurses like Clara Barton at Antietam treated the mangled results of these tactics amid fields turned red. Critics label Civil War generals as butchers, Lee's aggressiveness at Gettysburg, Grant's attrition at Cold Harbor. But context matters. They adapted within limits. Grant used railroads for logistics. Lee maneuvered brilliantly. Still, the war's scale demanded decisive battles, and lines offered the best shot at breakthrough. As the war dragged to 1865, tactics evolved further. Sherman's march to the sea emphasized mobility over confrontation, but when fights came, lines persisted. Appomattox ended it, but the question lingers. Was it worth it? In hindsight, yes and no. Linear tactics won the war for the Union through sheer persistence, but at unimaginable cost. They reflected an era on the cusp, muskets giving way to rifles, feudal discipline to industrial slaughter. World War I would echo this tragedy, with machine guns amplifying the lethality. As the smoke clears from those blood-soaked fields, one chilling truth emerges. Civil War generals weren't just tacticians. They were gamblers betting lives on outdated glory, knowing rifles had turned valor into massacre. But what if those suicidal marches weren't folly, but the only path to crush slavery or preserve a way of life? Imagine if modern wars still demanded such raw, unflinching courage. Would you walk the line? The ghosts of Gettysburg whisper, "Bravery's price is eternal debate." Thanks for watching. History's lessons linger.